I noticed him just before closing time. It was 11:45 p.m., and I was finishing my shift at the small convenience store on the outskirts of town. The place wasn't much, just rows of snacks, a few refrigerators humming in the back, and a checkout counter with a sticky register. I'd been working there for about 6 months. It wasn't a great job, but it was quiet, and I didn't mind the solitude. That night, everything had been normal. A few late night customers, truckers grabbing coffee, teenagers sneaking beer they weren't old enough to buy. Nothing out of the ordinary until he walked in. The bell above the door jingled, and I looked up from my phone. He was tall, wearing a dark hoodie with the hood pulled low over his face. His hands were shoved into his pockets. He didn't go to the shelves. He didn't browse. He just stood there, just inside the door, watching me. My stomach tightened. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. He didn't respond, just stood there. The air felt different, thicker. Something about him set my nerves on edge. I glanced at the clock. 11:47 p.m., just 13 more minutes until I could lock up and leave. I cleared my throat. "Sir, if you need something, we close soon." Still, he didn't move. I forced myself to look away, pretending to busy myself with wiping the counter. Maybe he was just some weird guy killing time. But he didn't. I glanced back. He had moved just slightly. He was closer now, standing near the candy aisle. I hadn't heard him step forward. My hand hovered over the silent alarm button under the counter. I wasn't the type to scare easily, but this guy, something about him made my skin crawl. 11:50 p.m., 5 more minutes, and I could tell him to get out. I watched as he tilted his head, like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. Then slowly, he turned his head toward the security camera in the corner and smiled. My breath hitched. It wasn't a normal smile. It was too wide, his lips pulling back unnaturally, like he was stretching his skin just for show. My pulse pounded in my ears. Then, in a whisper so soft I almost thought I imagined it, he said, "You're not alone." A shiver ran down my spine. "What?" I managed to croak. He didn't answer. He just turned, walked straight to the stockroom door, and pushed it open like he belonged there. That door was supposed to be locked. Adrenaline surged through me. "Hey!" I called after him, coming around the counter. My feet felt heavy, but I forced myself to follow. The stockroom was small, lined with metal shelves stacked with boxes, dimly lit by a single flickering bulb, but he wasn't there. It was empty. I stood frozen, my breath coming in short gasps. He had walked in, but there was nowhere to go. No back exit. No hiding places. He should have been there. I turned back toward the front of the store, my hands shaking. The place was silent. Then, the door chime jingled. I spun around. The store was empty, but the security monitor behind the counter showed something else. The camera feed flickered, showing static for a brief second. Then, I saw myself standing behind the counter. Just standing, staring at the camera, except I wasn't behind the counter. I was in the stockroom. A cold sweat broke over me. On the screen, the other me slowly raised his hand and waved. The power cut out. I don't remember leaving the store. I don't remember locking up. The next thing I knew, I was in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. The parking lot was dark, the store nothing but a dimly lit box in my rearview mirror. I quit the next day, never went back, didn't even pick up my last paycheck. But it didn't stop there. That night, as I tried to sleep, I felt uneasy. My apartment was small, just a one-bedroom with barely any furniture. The only light came from a street lamp filtering through the blinds. But even in the dim glow, I could see my reflection in the mirror on the closet door, and it wasn't right. I sat up, staring at it. That reflection wasn't moving the way I was. It blinked too late. The tilt of its head didn't match mine. My breath caught in my throat. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The reflection flickered just for a second, like static on a screen, before suddenly snapping back to normal. I barely slept. The days that followed weren't any better. I'd catch glimpses of movement in mirrors, screens, even puddles on the street. At first, I told myself I was imagining it, just paranoia, but then I started hearing it, the whisper, "You're not alone." It would come from behind me, from empty rooms, from my own phone when it was turned off. Always in that same, soft voice. I stopped looking in mirrors altogether. A week later, I was at a coffee shop, desperate to be around people, Hoping the noise would drown out the paranoia, I ordered my drink, turned to find a seat, and nearly dropped my cup. There was a man sitting at the farthest table in the corner, hood pulled low, watching me. My stomach lurched. It was him. I turned back to the counter, my breath coming fast. The barista looked at me. "You okay?" I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "That guy in the corner? Do you see him?" The barista frowned, glancing over. "Who?" I turned back. The table was empty. Cold terror flooded my veins. I left my drink and walked straight out of the shop, heart hammering. That was 3 days ago. I've stopped going outside, stopped answering my phone. Every time I hear a noise in my apartment, I freeze, waiting for the whisper. Last night, I made the mistake of turning on the TV. The screen flickered to life, showing static before the image settled. It was me, sitting on my couch. Except I wasn't sitting. I was standing. The me on the screen slowly turned its head toward the camera, toward me, and waved. The TV shut off on its own. I don't know what's happening to me. I don't know if I ever left that store, or if something else walked out in my place. But I know one thing, I'm not alone. I knew something was wrong the moment I stepped into the Airbnb. The smell hit me first. It wasn't strong, but there was something stale in the air, like a house that hadn't been lived in for too long. The pictures on the listing showed a cozy, well-lit apartment, modern furniture, warm lighting, a clean, minimalistic look. But standing there in the doorway, I felt an immediate sense of something off. The air felt thick, almost damp. The walls seemed darker than in the pictures. The corners of the rooms swallowed in shadow. I should have turned around and left right then, but I didn't. I was exhausted after an 8-hour drive and just wanted a place to sleep before continuing to my parents' house in the morning. The host had good reviews, the place was cheap, and most importantly, it was available last minute. I let out a breath and forced myself to move inside. The living room was small, but functional: sofa, coffee table, TV mounted on the wall. The kitchen was in the corner, neat and unused. Down the hall was the bedroom, with a neatly made bed that looked more inviting than anything else. I shut the door behind me. The sound echoed slightly, like the walls were thinner than they should have been. My skin prickled. "You're just tired." I shook it off and locked the door. The first thing I did was check my phone. No signal. That was strange. I had full bars outside, but now, nothing. I toggled airplane mode on and off. Still nothing. The Wi-Fi connected at least. I texted my mom to let her know I'd made it and set my phone on the charger before heading to the bathroom to wash up. When I looked up into the mirror, I saw it. A shadow. Behind me. I spun around, my heart hammering, but the bathroom was empty. For a moment, I just stood there, my breath loud in the silence. Then I laughed, a short, nervous chuckle. I was too damn tired for this. I turned off the lights and collapsed onto the bed, pulling the blankets around me. The mattress was surprisingly comfortable, and despite the weird atmosphere, exhaustion won over unease. My eyelids grew heavy. Just as I was about to drift off, I heard it. A soft creak, the sound of a door opening. My eyes snapped open. The room was dark, but I could still make out the faint shape of the bedroom door closed, just as I'd left it. Maybe it was the wind outside. Maybe an old pipe settling in the walls. Maybe. I turned onto my side and forced my body to relax. Another creak. Closer. The sound of slow, deliberate footsteps. I held my breath. Now, I was imagining it. I had to be. The Airbnb was empty. I was alone. I squeezed my eyes shut. If I didn't acknowledge it, it wasn't real. The room was silent again. After a few minutes, I let myself believe I'd imagined it, and then I heard breathing. Right next to me. My whole body locked up. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The air was thick, heavy, pressing down on me. You're dreaming, but I wasn't. Slowly, painfully, I turned my head, and I saw it. A figure, lying beside me in the bed. Its face was inches from mine, barely visible in the darkness. Eyes open, watching. I felt my heart seize, my lungs stop working. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to move, to run, to do anything. And then, it smiled, so wide. I scrambled backward, falling off the bed. My shoulder hit the floor hard, but I barely felt it. I shoved myself to my feet, fumbling for the light switch. The bulb flickered on. The bed was empty. The room was exactly as it had been. The blankets were still neatly tucked in. untouched. I stood there shaking, my breath ragged, and then my phone buzzed. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I grabbed it off the nightstand. The screen was still dark, but a single notification had appeared. A message from an unknown number. 4 words. Did you sleep well? I didn't even grab my bag. I bolted. The hallway outside the apartment was dead silent. The building felt empty, lifeless. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above as I ran for the stairs, my pulse thudding in my ears. I didn't stop moving until I was in my car, engine roaring to life. I drove until I saw the glow of a gas station ahead, pulling into the lot and parking under the bright overhead lights. My hands were still shaking as I reached for my phone. I checked my call history, my texts, nothing. Like it had never been there at all. I didn't go back. I didn't leave a review. I just kept driving, pushing through the exhaustion until I made it to my parents' house. I told myself it was just a trick of my tired mind, that stress and sleep deprivation had gotten the better of me. That's what I had to believe. But every now and then when I'm in bed, in the quiet, dark stillness of my room, I feel something watching, something just beyond my vision, waiting, smiling. And I can't help but wonder, what if I never really left? I never liked my basement. It wasn't one of those old crumbling things you see in horror movies. No exposed beams, no dangling light bulbs that flicker at the worst times. It was finished, modern, even cozy in some ways. Carpeted floors, a small couch, a television, a place meant for entertainment, not fear. But something about it always made me uneasy. Maybe it was the way sound fell wrong down there, like my own breathing echoed just a little too much. Or how, no matter how many times I adjusted the thermostat, the air always felt a few degrees too cold. I had lived in this house for a little over a year, bought it alone after getting a promotion at work. It was a good deal too good, some might say. 3 bedrooms, a nice backyard, a quiet neighborhood. I worked in it, mostly from home, so I spent a lot of time in my house. I liked the solitude. I told myself that's all, it was just an adjustment to living alone. But the feeling didn't go away. If anything, it got worse. It started small. I would wake up and find the basement door unlocked when I knew I had locked it. Sometimes I'd hear faint creaks from below when I was upstairs. Houses settle, I told myself. Wood contracts, air shifts. But then, one night, something happened that I couldn't explain away. It was around 2 a.m. I had fallen asleep on the couch in the living room while watching TV. The glow of the screen was the only light in the room, casting faint, twitching shadows on the walls. Then click, the basement door opened. Not swung open, not even fully ajar, just enough for the latch to release. A small, precise movement, like someone had deliberately turned the handle just enough to push it open a crack. I bolted upright. For a long minute, I just stared at the dark gap in the doorway, my heart hammering. Then, slowly, I stood up. I grabbed the heaviest object within reach, a ceramic lamp, and crept toward the basement door. My breath was shallow, my skin clammy. I nudged the door open a little more with my foot. The stairs yawned down into the pitch-black void below. I waited, listening. Silence. I reached for the light switch and flicked it on. The basement lit up instantly. Nothing. No movement. No noise. I let out a shaky breath and forced myself to step down. 1, 2, 3 stairs. I glanced around. Nothing out of place, just the couch, the TV, the bookshelves. I locked the basement door that night, double-checked it twice before going to bed. But the next morning, it was unlocked again. Over the next few days, more things started happening. I would hear soft creaks from the basement when I was upstairs, not the loud house-settling kind, but deliberate sounds, like the weight of careful footsteps. Sometimes, when I walked past the basement door, I swore I heard a faint breathing on the other side. Not loud, not aggressive, just there, waiting. Then one night, I dreamed of the basement. In my dream, I was standing at the top of the stairs looking down. The light was on, but it wasn't the warm yellow light from my actual basement. It was cold, bluish, almost surgical. The stairs stretched downward longer than they should have, like the basement had deepened, extending into some impossible, endless void. And at the bottom of the stairs, something was looking up at me. I couldn't see its face, couldn't make out any details, just the impression of something crouched at the bottom, staring up with a quiet, patient hunger. Then it started moving, fast, I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. For the first time since I moved in, I seriously considered leaving. But where would I go? This was my house. I had no explanation for any of this. No proof that it wasn't just my mind playing tricks on me. So I stayed. That was a mistake. 3 nights later, I was lying in bed, scrolling through my phone, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling in my gut. The house was silent, too silent. Then click. The basement door again. My stomach clenched. I sat up, every muscle in my body tensing. I wanted to ignore it. I wanted to pretend I hadn't heard it, but I had. I reached for my bedside lamp. That's when I heard the footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving up the stairs. No creaks, no hesitation, just steady, controlled steps, as if whoever was down there had finally decided to come up. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. The steps stopped, right outside my bedroom. I held my breath. Seconds stretched into eternity. I swore I could hear something breathing just beyond my door. I didn't move, didn't blink. Then, the door handle started to turn. That's when I lost it. I jumped out of bed and slammed my weight against the door, twisting the lock as fast as I could. My ears were ringing. My whole body was shaking. I pressed my back to the wood, bracing against it, waiting for something to push back, but nothing did. Silence. I stayed like that all night, didn't sleep, didn't dare open the door. By morning, I forced myself to check the basement. The door was wide open. The stairs stretched downward into the dark. I didn't go down. I packed a bag and left that afternoon. I didn't even try to sell the house. I just broke my lease and moved across the city. I don't know what was down there, but I know one thing. It wasn't just waiting anymore. It was coming up, and I wasn't going to be there when it did. I first noticed it about a month after moving in, a feeling, subtle at first, like being watched. You know the sensation, the prickle at the back of your neck, the unshakable awareness that someone, somewhere, is looking at you. But every time I turned, there was nothing. Just my empty apartment and the muffled sounds of city life outside. I had moved into this place for a fresh start. New job, new city, new everything. It was a small one-bedroom unit on the 4th floor. I worked long hours at an eye company, and when I got home, I was usually too drained to care about anything except dinner and sleep. Maybe that's why it took me so long to notice it. The unease started small. I'd be sitting on my couch, scrolling on my phone, and suddenly feel the need to glance up like I'd caught movement out of the corner of my eye. But there was never anything there. The shadows in the room always sat just as they should. No open doors, no displaced objects. At first, I told myself it was just nerves. Adjusting to a new place could do that. The mind plays tricks when it's somewhere unfamiliar. But then things began to escalate. One night, I woke up abruptly. No sound had startled me, no nightmare, just the sharp, sudden awareness that I needed to open my eyes. My bedroom was dark, but the glow from the street lamp outside cast just enough light to outline the furniture and the figure in the corner. My breath caught in my throat. Someone was standing in the farthest corner of my bedroom, motionless. My first instinct was to scream, to bolt, but something stopped me. My brain refused to process what I was seeing. The figure was dark, just a silhouette against the even darker shadows. No features, no movement. Just a solid, unmoving presence watching me. I scrambled for my phone on the nightstand, fumbling with the screen to turn on the flashlight. My hand shook so badly that I nearly dropped it. When I finally managed to swipe the light on, nothing. The corner was empty. I sat there panting, the sheets tangled around me, my skin damp with sweat. It had felt so real, but the room was silent, unchanged. I checked the door, still locked. Windows latched. There was no way anyone had gotten in. Sleep didn't come easy that night. I wanted to believe it was just a dream, but then the sounds started. Soft creaks in the floorboards when I was in the other room. The faint rustle of fabric, like someone shifting in a chair. I even convinced myself once that I heard breathing deep, slow, deliberate, but every time I checked, my apartment was empty, nothing disturbed, nothing missing. Then, one evening, I was watching TV when I noticed something that made my stomach turn. My phone was on the coffee table, screen dark, but as I reached for it, I saw the smudges, 4 faint streaks near the bottom of the screen, like fingerprints, but they were too large to be mine. I tried to brush it off. Maybe I had pressed my palm against the screen at some point. But the rationalizations didn't help when I started waking up to find the bedroom door slightly ajar. I always shut my door before bed, always. And yet, each morning, it was open just an inch or two. Just enough. One night, I decided to test myself to prove that I wasn't losing my mind. I set up my phone on a shelf, propped against a book, recording while I slept. I let it run all night. The next morning, I hesitated before watching the footage. My gut twisted with an instinctive dread, but I had to know. The first few hours were uneventful. Just me, shifting occasionally, breathing steady. Then, around 3:12 a.m., the bedroom door slowly creaked open. No one was there. The door moved with excruciating slowness, pausing briefly, then opening another few inches before stopping completely. And then, at 3:15 a.m., the closet door behind me shifted. I stopped the video. I couldn't watch anymore. My stomach was in knots, my skin cold. There was no way. No way. I left the apartment that day, called in sick to work. I needed to clear my head. Maybe even look for a new place. But when I came back that evening, the air inside felt different, charged. I checked every room. Nothing was missing. Nothing was out of place, except my phone. It was sitting on my nightstand, even though I had left it in the living room. And when I picked it up, there was a new recording, a single video, 3 minutes long. With shaking hands, I pressed play. The footage was dark, grainy. The camera was angled at my bed, recording my sleeping form, but I wasn't holding the phone. Someone else had been filming. I saw myself shift in my sleep, oblivious. Then, at the 2-minute mark, something moved in the corner of the room. A shadow detached itself from the darkness, stepping forward, closer. My breath hitched as I watched the figure reach toward my face, fingers hovering just over my skin. Close enough that, had I woken up, I would have felt the air shift. Then, the video cut to black. I dropped the phone. My entire body was trembling. I wanted to scream, to run, to do something, but I just sat there, unable to breathe. I moved out that night, packed a bag and left. I didn't even break my lease, I just never went back. I found a cheap motel on the other side of town and stayed there for 2 weeks before scraping together enough money for another apartment. I never told anyone what happened. What could I even say? That I was being watched. That something lived in the shadows of my old place. That I still wake up, heart pounding, expecting to see a figure standing in the corner of my new bedroom. Even now, in a different apartment, different city, different life, I still feel it. That unshakable sensation that I am never alone. Because some nights, I wake up to my closet door slightly ajar, and I wonder if I ever really left it behind.